Hi everyone, Curtis here from Goth Rider Creations, and in today's episode I'm going to be doing a little bit more work on the workshop. Now, I have to admit, I actually find organising and sorting out scrap wood a little bit therapeutic. Taking out the nails out of pallet wood, ripping down sections of waste timber, I actually find it quite meditative. It's quite enjoyable for me in a weird way. It gives you time to think. On today's list of thoughts was mostly what on earth am I going to do with this giant pile of pine that I've been getting hold of lately. Now, the overall plan is to make guitar bodies for people. Simple, lightweight, cheap more than anything. The way I see it, with the amount I have here, I could quite easily make body blanks for people, and then sell them basically at cost, just a little bit of time, a bit of postage. If anyone's interested in that, please let me know in the comments, because I'd like to know if it is something that is viable. But the main thought throughout all of this is, how am I actually going to make them? Now, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of clamps. I never needed to glue up many things. It was mostly everything was screwed together for me, so the idea of having tons of clamps was never important enough. I'd spend my money on other tools. And unfortunately, I don't have the gift of the gab or the sweetness or niceness of getting a sponsorship for some clamps like one of my nice friends. Todd, let me know how you did that. But so it was a case of, what do I do? Now, while I was in this meditative state, I did remember a video I watched a few years ago from a really awesome guy on YouTube, and he created a gluing up board. His name is Izzy Swan. If you get a chance to look at his channel, the guy is a really talented woodworker, makes some really good, cheap and easy and simple jigs to help woodworkers. And on a personal level, he spent the last few years recovering from a spinal condition that pretty much left him paralysed. So, he's an awesome guy. Now, the clamping boards he makes are mostly either with pneumatic holders for the timber to actually provide the clamping pressure, or you basically turn it into a giant pegboard and then you sort out the bits from, you use the clamping pressure from that. Now, I didn't like either, and the way I see it, with the amounts of timber I have here, I could make a solid wood gluing board and then just use screws and wedges, so that basically became the plan. So it was just a case of milling down these piles and piles and piles of timber into usable sections, so then I could go from there. And speaking of meditation, here's a little cautionary tale. Be very careful when using the table saw. As you're about to see here, kickback is a real thing, and when you're not paying attention, it can do some serious damage. Now, that was completely my fault, but as you're about to see, that could have been a lot worse than it was. Always pay attention when you're using power tools, children, because it took a very large chunk out of the piece of timber. Luckily it wasn't expensive, and it took a minor chunk out of my finger. So it's not ideal. But anyway, so from here it's just a case of topping and tailing all of the bits of timber. Unfortunately, all of the pieces that I get from this local manufacturer are pretty much always triangular. Now, that is going to be helpful if in the future, because I have got enough wedges in a bag that I could use for decades. But it does mean that there's a lot of cuts. Eventually I'm just going to see if there's something I can do with the sawdust, because it's waste materials, so it's not waste as such, but it's not as ideal as it could be to actually use the large pieces. The problem is the angles of each piece of wood that's triangular is different by a couple of degrees, so yeah. So it doesn't take a lot to get it all processed down and sorted. From there, it is literally just a case of getting it all glued up. Now, I did have to hijack a bit of the living room for this. Thank you, Mrs. Goth Rider, because I wasn't going to do this outside. And here you will see the 3 large clamps that I own. And this is why I'm building this thing in the first place. I managed to find these at a car boot sale. I think I got them for £3 each. But yeah, this is literally all I have for glue ups. Now, there is an issue with having to joint them all in the middle. Unfortunately, that was the timber I had. It was all I had, and I didn't have any large pieces. I made it as large as I could fit, so yeah, I think it is about 1 meter by 1 meter. So it was all I could do to get all these pieces. One thing I did do off camera once the glue up was completed. Oh, and here's my little tester. She's a wonderful little assistant for making sure that my glue up is straight and level and compressed on just one side. Thanks for that. So yes, the glue up's all done. Once it's clamped, the next day I went in off camera and I put a load of supports, which you will just about see now, into the back, as well as the side and bottom rails. I spent quite a long time making sure they were absolutely parallel, made sure they were perfectly square, because that is the line from which all of the slabs are going to be made from. From there, it was literally just cut it all down to size, get rid of all the extraneous bits. Most of these scrap pieces actually ended up going into the first slab, so nothing was particularly wasted, which is always good. And yeah, it was just a case of tidying it up. I mean, if you're going to be making a clamping board, it's much more ideal to use a single piece of timber. There will be no warping, there will be no changes, there will be no joins that will be an issue. But this was free, so there you go. And in the centre there you can see just how many screws I put into that centre section to make sure everything lined up exactly as it should have done. And from there it was literally 2 coats of water-based varnish. Nothing expensive, nothing complicated. You do want to seal the timber, because obviously the first time you use a bit of decent strength glue on it, you will just stick the slab to the gluing board. Obviously makes sense. Another thing that I did off camera that I didn't show is using car wax. Simple, normal turtle wax, or whatever brand you prefer. I got a large tub for £3 and I used that for everything from mould release for resin through to sorting out these bits for the clamping boards. Give it a good coat once every 6 months, and that is literally all you need. It doesn't take a lot. If you're using Gorilla Glue or some of like the polyurethane glues, you might want to put a bit of a backing paper on there just to stop it sticking, but for normal wood glues this is absolutely fine and does the trick. From there we've got the backing boards. I literally just took all of the scraps and glued them together and made 3 pieces. I did want to put a half decent angle on the bottom so it doesn't sit flat against the wall. I think I went a little bit too far and it does stick out quite a bit. I might even have to move my workbench slightly because my fat butt can't get behind it. But at the same time I wanted to make sure I had a decent enough angle so that if I glue up something that's quite thin, the last thing I need is to bump into it and just knock it all over the floor while it's drying. So it's always ideal to have a few degrees angle on there. I just think I went a little bit too far. And as you can see, it's literally just screw in blocks. You get the slab as high as you need it to, screw in some blocks about 1 centimetre above the top piece, and then just put in wedges. It really is that simple. Just hammer them in, make sure it's level, use a spirit level, just make sure that everything is where it should be, and that's it. You don't need insane amounts of, you know, clamps or equipment to do these things. You can do it a much simpler way. As you can see, it does take a bit of work, and I think in total, with everything that was going on, it was about a 2-month build just for this. Could have done it on a weekend if I'd really pushed myself, but it is what it is, and it was basically free. I think the only thing that cost me was the glue. And here, unfortunately, is me taking down everything in the workshop. As you're about to see, it takes up quite a bit of space and weighs an absolute ton. I was not best pleased with how long that took to get that lifted in, but it will do the trick. So there we have it, everyone. One clamping board. This has actually been filmed over a few months. I did start this quite a while back, but I figured it's about time I started getting some things finished. So this is all ready to go. The next time you see this in action will be me gluing up the blank for the Silent Zombie. So, although it will be back in time because you're going to watch me gluing it together in the living room because I had nowhere else to put this. Don't ask. So yes, here we go, another improvement to the workshop. Unfortunately, it means that the batleth has had to be evicted. I know quite a few of you quite like the batleth, but yeah, it will go somewhere else for the meantime, and then when I get a chance, hopefully towards the end of this year, if I get time, then I'll try and finish this, and then it will have pride of place in the house. So there we go. Thank you so much for joining me for another one of my slightly unusual shed updates. Yes, please subscribe if you haven't already. Comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you all on the next one. Take care.